Right. Good afternoon and welcome to this week's Iowa Learning Farms Conservation Webinar. I'm Matt Helmers in the Department of Ag and Biosystems Engineering and Director of the Iowa Nutrient Research Center and faculty advisor to the Iowa Learning Farm. So it's my great pleasure to get to moderate again today. I think we have a really important talk. Cover crops are always important, and thinking about what are some of the impacts of cover crops are really important. So I think this topic is right in line with that. As I was telling Dr. Jha when he got on, I hope that we get some rain this fall to get any cover crops growing. It's pretty darn dry out there, so we'll hope for some rain. And one other item is that I wanted to also highlight that tomorrow at 1 o'clock, we're going to have a virtual field day talking about pumped bioreactors. I'll put the registration link in the chat box here in a bit, but before I forget, which I will do, I wanted to get that. So today we are really fortunate to have Dr. Prashant Jha, that's a professor and extension weed specialist in the Department of Agronomy here at Iowa State University, to talk about cereal rye cover crop, an ecological tactic to manage herbicide-resistant weed seed banks in soybeans. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Jha. And at the end of his, or as he goes through his talk, feel free to type any questions in the chat box. Those will come to me, and I can get to Prashant at the end of his talk. So with that, the virtual floor is all yours.
Very good morning to all of you, and thank you, Dr. Helmers, for the introduction. So it's a great pleasure to talk about these topics, especially we know the importance of cereal rye from a sustainability standpoint, but also today I'm going to talk about how this can be used as an ecological tactic to manage herbicide resistance in soybean-based production systems of Iowa. So before we start discussing or talking about the cover crop and how we can best utilize cereal rye as a cover crop in our corn soybean production system for weed management, I would like to focus your attention on the driver weeds of Iowa corn and soybean, and those are giant ragweed, mare's tail, and water hemp. We know they are called as driver weeds because they have developed resistance not only to glyphosate but to other herbicides, including group 2s and group 5, which is atrazine. More so, water hemp has been the most troublesome weed of the Midwest corn and soybean production system, and also for the Iowa soybean production system, because it has evolved resistance to multiple herbicide groups or herbicide sites of action that you are seeing here. We do not have confirmed cases of water hemp with resistance to group 4 herbicides, including 2,4-D and dicamba, where there is an increase in the use of 2,4-D and dicamba with our enlist trait and extend trait. However, we do have confirmed cases of group 2 atrazine resistance. Resistance to glyphosate is very widespread. Resistance to group 14 and 27, as well as group 15, we do not have any confirmed cases so far, but we have suspected cases of group 15 resistance here in Iowa, and more confirmed cases in the nearby states, for example, Illinois. So right now, we have populations in the Midwest, in Illinois populations, which have developed 7-way multiple herbicide resistance in those water hemp populations that I'm talking about here. You can see the level of infestation in this particular field of water hemp, and these plants have survived 3 in-season applications of herbicide. We conducted a survey, and one of my grad students, Ryan Hamburg, did this as a part of his master's research in 2019. Ryan collected close to 200 samples of water hemp from Iowa corn and soybean production sites, and those were georeferenced sites, which the populations were collected back in 2013. We went back to those sites and collected more populations to see how the dynamics of resistance has changed over the period of last 6 to 7 years. And what we are seeing here is these are the 1x rate of the herbicide, which is the field use rate. We are seeing a lot of these populations are multiple resistant with 2, 3, and 4-way resistance. In some cases, we are seeing up to 5-way resistance, which means they are resistant to these group numbers 2, group 5 atrazine, glyphosate, PPO herbicides, group 14 like Flexstar, and group 27, which is the HPPD chemistry like Callisto. Even those populations are surviving the 4 times the use rate, which means they are definitely or confirmed resistant to these 5 different side of action of herbicides. Some of these water populations did survive 2,4-D, and although in our initial screening, we didn't find any survivors for dicamba or glufosinate liberty. So those are, again, good strategies or good herbicides so far. We have no confirmed cases of 2,4-D, as I said, or dicamba resistant water here in Iowa, but it has been reported very recently in a population which is 7-way resistant in Illinois. So these are some of the survivors of 2,4-D 28 days after application of Analyst 1, and these plants were producing seed, and as you can see here on the right-hand side. However, at higher rate, these plants did not survive 2,4-D or dicamba, so we cannot say for confirmation purpose, we cannot say that we have confirmed the populations of group 4 resistance. Glufosinate is still by far very effective on our water hemp populations that we have screened so far. This graph here shows the number of herbicide sites of action that have come into the marketplace since 1940 up until the period of 1995, 96. A lot of these chemistries came into the marketplace, and over the period of last 3 decades, we are seeing no new site of action up until 2021. And within that time frame, as you see here, when there is no new herbicide site of action in the marketplace, weeds have continued to evolve resistance, and we have cases of resistance up to 21 different site of action of herbicides and 164 different herbicides that weeds have already evolved resistance to. And these are the site of actions or group numbers that there are a total of 8 of those group numbers that we use in water hemp for water hemp management in corn and soybean, and we have cases of resistance, as I mentioned earlier. So it is really a time to critically think about how we should think forward with regards to managing herbicide resistance as a threat to our soybean-based production system. So with the ultimate goal of planting into a low weed seed bank, that's the main goal. So we are focusing on our efforts in more of an integrated strategies and bringing some of these ecological tactics, like including cover crops as well as reduced row spacing. And also one of the technologies that we are working on is the harvest weed seed control, where we are targeting the weed seeds at harvest. In today's presentation, I'm going to talk most of the research that has been done in cereal rye cover crops over the last couple of years, with some in more integrated use of cereal rye cover crop and row spacing in soybean. So this research was conducted by one of my grad students, Steve Durden, in 2020 and 2021 for his master's research, looking at the optimizing the termination timing of cereal rye cover crop in soybean so that we get maximum or full potential benefits with regards to managing the water hemp seed bank. So I'm not going to show all the data today, but and these are some of the studies that we are doing at multi-location sites also, at grower fields also, but I'm just showing some of the results here today to give you an idea about how best we can utilize cereal rye. So the main plot factor in this particular research done by Steve Durden was cover crop versus no cover crop, and cereal rye was planted was drill planted at 60 pounds per acre. And in some cases, we planted up to 55 pounds per acre. And those plots were further divided into two major subplots, which were based on termination timing of the cereal rye in the following spring. And the first one was early termination, where the cereal rye was terminated 7 days before soybean planting. And then we have a late termination where cereal rye was planted was terminated after soybean planting, which is the plant green concept. For all these terminations, we used glyphosate at the recommended use rate of 32 ounces with or without pre-residual herbicides. So our third factor, which was the subplot factor, was the different herbicide programs in soybean. So these are the different herbicide programs. We have VD check plots where the rye was terminated with Roundup or glyphosate, and then we have post-only program within the two termination timing treatments, and we have pre followed by post program and one application of post residual where our residual herbicide was prefix, which is a combination of S-metolachlor and permicillin. They were applied at the field use rate. So these are some of the plots at the Brunner farm here in central Iowa. This is the stage of cereal rye when it has started heading at the early anthesis stage. That's where when we terminated the cereal rye, and you can see some of the no cover crop plots here. After termination of the cereal rye with glyphosate, you can see the amount of biomass in between these plots. At the same time, here I'm showing the different like the late terminated cereal rye, we see the amount of biomass, and the early terminated plots where there is less biomass. Again, all of these sites had a natural infestation of glyphosate-resistant mare's tail and water hemp. So this picture is self-explanatory. Here you see on the left-hand side no cover crop plots at the time of after application of one post Liberty or glufosinate. You can see the amount with single post applications of Liberty, we know that it's not going to work. And in the absence of cover crop, a lot of mare's tail, as you can see here. With early termination, there is definitely one of the advantages we have seen consistently across our sites. I'm not showing all the data across the sites here, but with the single application of even Liberty, what you are not seeing here is those mare's tail plants that have emerged in the previous fall. You are not seeing mare's tail, so definitely that even you are terminating your cereal rye early, 7 days before soybean planting, we are still getting good mare's tail control. However, if you look at the back of the plots, there is good bit of water hemp there. And this is our late terminated cereal rye, which was the soybean was planted green. You see the amount of biomass in between the crop rows from the cereal rye and the small sized water hemp plants there as compared to these on your left. So definitely with the same herbicide program, Liberty Post only, you see a clear difference that is attributed by the cereal rye being terminated late. Some of the data here that Steve collected for his master's research 1 week after planting. This is the mare's tail density averaged across the locations in 2021. CC represents the cover crop. Termination timing 1 is the early termination timing, and termination timing 2 is the late termination timing. And no CC, these set up 2 graphs on the right you're seeing is the no cover crop. We see a clear difference both at 1 week after planting as well as at 5 weeks after planting of soybean, a clear difference of more than 90% reduction in the presence of cover crop, and a greater effect, although it was not statistically different on the mare's tail density, but we see a definitely more than 95% reduction when we delay the termination of cereal rye. As you can see on the left-hand side, some of the rye, tall rye biomass in between the soybean rows. Looking at the mare's tail biomass, which indicates the size of the plants, and 5 weeks after planting, I would like to go back in this slide is 5 weeks after planting, this which you are seeing by the dark blue bars. this is the time when Liberty post application was made. So water hemp, maize tail biomass, we also see the similar kind of trend, definitely a greater advantage in terms of biomass or size of the plants when we were delaying the termination timing of cereal rye and in the plant clean situation. Coming to the water hemp density, as you can see in the left-hand side, these water hemp plants are much smaller in size, and they were there was less density, and you can see a clear effect of the cover crop here as compared to the no cover crop plots, both at 5 and more so at 10 weeks after planting. And again, on the water hemp biomass, we see definitely by delaying the termination timing, we are seeing smaller size water hemp plants at the time of our post application. So this is definitely going to be a win-win strategy, because now when you are applying your post-emergence application, whether it's dicamba in extend soybeans, or it's 2,4-D in enlist soybeans, or it is glufosinate, Liberty, you are seeing smaller size, less density of your water hemp in those fields where there is a lot of biomass accumulation from delayed termination of your cover crop, cereal rye. How these cover crops interacted with our herbicide programs, that was one of the questions we had, and we wanted to answer in this. So the first set of graphs, bars that you are seeing here with orange color, they are the no cover crop plots with different applications of Liberty alone, Liberty with pre-emergence residual and pre-emergence residual herbicide applied with Liberty. Same set of treatments here, but in the presence of the cover crop, and this is again the data averaged across the termination timings. We see a clear reduction in water hemp density numbers per meter square as a result of the cover crop, regardless of the herbicide program. So this is Liberty alone. You can see the more than 200 water hemp plants per meter square. However, with the same program, Liberty alone, the picture that I showed you earlier, we see a remarkable reduction. Again, these numbers, 50 plants or 75 plants per meter square is still a large number. And again, these plots are naturally infested with water hemp. But again, if you look at the percent reduction, that's what it matters. So we are seeing a great percent reduction among these just from the effect of the cover crop. So again, this is also valuable in terms of reducing your number of passes or reducing the reliance on your herbicides. And these are the herbicide only practice, and this is with the cover crop practice. Again, we are seeing the effect of cover crop. This is the amount of biomass that you can imagine. And this amount of biomass early in the season, in May up until June, definitely is acting as a soil residual herbicide, basically. So definitely, it gives you now the flexibility to delay your application of the residual herbicide and make it with the early post application as one pass treatment, because we know that water hemp keeps on emerging. So definitely you need to have that layered residual herbicide program. So that's a great advantage. And this was not different from when you're applying your early followed by post only program. So that's one of the great advantages I would like to highlight here. Because oftentimes we come into this situation because of our dry conditions that we face sometimes. For example, 2020 and 2021 was especially dry, and the herbicide was not doing a whole lot there, the pre-emergence applied in the spring. So this cover crop is kind of like will serve as against that risk, right? Because you are getting good amount of biomass early in the season that is acting more or less as a complementary strategy for your weed control. We did not see any reduction in the soybean yields across our studies, and we have data now for several studies, and we haven't found any clear difference. Although, depending on the weather conditions, if it is dry, you may see with this amount of biomass that you're seeing in the plots, you may see the soybean growth early in the season is little slow because it has to come out through that heavy residue of your standing cereal rye. But again, by the time the soybean canopy formation happens, we didn't see any difference in the height of those plants at the same time. The same set of data that we got for the soybean yield. These are the cover crop and no cover crop on your left. All those four, we are not seeing any statistical difference because of the delayed termination timing, which is the TT2 right here. Also, I'd like to highlight that when we are using a cover crop, early or delayed termination timing, for example, in the delayed termination timing, just with one Liberty post, it was statistically statistically similar to the 2-pass herbicide program in the absence of the cover crop. So definitely you are reducing your reliance with these set of treatments and not affecting your soybean yield from the delayed termination timing. Also, from this point onwards, I'm going to talk about one of the studies done by one of my PhD graduate students, Ram Yadav, looking at how we can integrate these tactics, these ecological tactics like cover crop and row spacing to manage herbicide-resistant wheat seed banks. So in this particular study, as you can see on the left-hand side, this set of pictures were taken in 2020. And on the right-hand side, you see the soybean with the cereal rye cover crop, and cereal rye was planted on October 10 and terminated on May 15, and the same date when we planted our soybeans, and the cereal rye was in the anthesis stage at the time. So this is again a plant green study, as you can see here. Looking a clear difference on the left-hand side versus right-hand side picture. As you can see, the tremendous amount of water I'm blowing in between the soybean rows here compared to this set of picture as you see on your right. So looking at some of the data that Ram collected for his PhD research, you can see a clear difference between this in the cereal rye cover crop has a significant impact in terms of reducing the water intensity by almost 30%. However, and this has been pretty consistent, we are seeing greater effect of the cereal rye on the size of the water hemp plants at the time of the post-application. So 60% reduction in the biomass or size of those plants. Overall, close to 70% reduction just from the cereal rye that you see a reduction in the seed production of those water hemp plants. So definitely it is a key strategy that we can utilize to reduce the inputs to the soil seed bank from those herbicide-resistant water hemp plants. Coming to the effect of row spacing here, 30 versus 15-inch rows, we see again significant reduction in the biomass. A similar kind of reduction we are seeing. We are saying these are complementary strategy because now they are reducing your reliance on the herbicide. At the same time, they are making your herbicide more effective and also reducing the seed bank inputs. This picture here taken by Avery Bennett at the ISU Brunner farm. You see a clear difference, no cover crop, 30-inch row spacing. That's our check for the study. You see a lot of biomass in between. As you are putting just a cereal rye, you see a reduction when you are putting a rye in combination with 15-inch row soybean versus 30-inch row soybean. You see but from the picture it is pretty clear. Soybean yields were not affected by the presence of cover crop that was terminated late at the time of soybean planting and in a plant green situation. However, in that particular study, we saw an 8 bushel per acre increase in the soybean yield when soybean was planted in 15-inch rows versus 30-inch rows. Overall, to conclude the study, there was no adverse effect of the delayed cover crop termination timing on the soybean canopy development and yield, because that is one of the questions that growers have been asking. Are we going to potentially affect the soybean yield? Because we are here in the north with a short growing season, so definitely more, getting that high amount of biomass. One of the strategies would be drill planting your cereal rye cover crop with almost like 50 to 55 pounds per acre seeding rate. We see greater stand establishment as well as better stand during the fall because of the drill planted cereal rye. And then soybean yields were higher in the plots with the narrow row soybean. And again, as I said, like these are ecological tactics. These are not standalone practices, but they're definitely complementary strategies to enhance the efficacy of your herbicide programs, to manage your seed bank over the period of 5 or 10 years, long-term reduction in the seed bank and reducing the selection pressure for resistance development. With that, I'd like to acknowledge my funding agencies for some of these research work. We are doing a lot of work with Iowa Soybean Association, United Soybean Board, and recently got 2 to 3 different fundings over the last 3 years from federal grants like USD and NIFA and CIG to look at more of on a broader scale how we can best integrate cereal rye herbicide programs and harvest weed seed control together at a cropping systems level. I'd like to acknowledge my team of graduate students and research staff who have been doing all this work that I have presented today. With that, I would like to focus your attention for the Certified Crop Advisor credits. If you have watched this webinar, definitely there is an opportunity to earn the CCA credits, and it is listed here what you need to do, your name, the name you entered to watch the webinar, etc. So please make note of this, and you can submit this information that you've attended the webinar.
Thanks, Prashant. And I can take this and you can catch your breath, and we got some questions coming in. So
Sure.
Next week we have Dr. Matt Nowatzki that's going to talk about designing decision support systems to facilitate farmland diversification, opportunities and barriers. So same time, same place for that. And just one last reminder that tomorrow at 1 o'clock, so it's 1 for the virtual field days, not 12 like the webinars. We have a virtual field day on pumped bioreactors, and information and link is in the chat box. So, okay, we have some questions that have come in. So I'll go to the first one. First one is, Dr. Jha, there have been no new herbicide modes of action developed in the last few decades. What's your optimism for additional herbicide modes of actions being discovered or developed in the near future?
That's an excellent question also for me at this point. I think there are some products which may be in the pipeline. I'm not aware of some of those, but in terms of new site of action and with the current regulations of EPA, as we know that we have seen the recent incidents with atrazine now and EPA regulations. So I think getting a new site of action is not going to be very easy in the near future. So maybe 5 or 10 years down the road.
This person indicated, what is Liberty Post? I seem to have missed that individual.
Yeah, the Liberty Post means the Liberty or glufosinate was applied as a post-emergence in soybean.
And somebody else asked, just to clarify, what was the seeding rate of the cereal rye for these studies?
For these studies, we used 55 to 60 pounds per acre of cereal rye.
Okay.
And it was all drill seeded.
Okay. And then there was, what was the previous year's crop, which the cover crop was planted into?
It was corn.
Okay. And then I guess, how was that seeded, and how would you propose maybe the best way to have rye planted in that into the corn, which is going to be combined?
So into the corn, if you're planting your cereal rye into the corn, you have to broadcast your cereal rye But in our situation, we did after the harvest of the corn. Okay, so our cereal rye was planted in October, 10th of October to middle of October. So if you're putting it in the, if you are seeding it with broadcasting your cereal rye, I would go with a higher seeding rate, because definitely there will be chances of seed predation and soil seed contact, and all those are the issues, right? So I will probably not go with 40 or 45 pounds, but I will go with the full rate of 60, 65 pounds in that case. But when you are drill seeding it, you can seeding rate has not, when under drill seeded conditions, we don't see a difference there. So you may get a very good stand even with 45 to 50 pounds of cereal rye with drill seeded in the fall.
So, but in your studies, that was all broadcast seeded?
It was drill seeded.
Oh, it was drill seeded. Okay, great. Drill seeded after harvest of the corn. Okay, great. With the 30-inch row spacing versus the 15-inch row spacing, was there any, or was the plant population higher in the 15-inch row spacing?
The plant population was the same.
It was the same. Okay. This one, another one is, how much effect does the pre-herbicide have in a dense cover crop?
That's a good question. So, I mean, we have not seen any differences in the efficacy of our pre-programs, whether we have used Warrant or Prefix. And there has been some cases, I mean, there is like, is the cereal rye with high amount of biomass going to intercept your pre-herbicide? Yes, it can, but we haven't seen any differences in the efficacy or of the pre-herbicides when applied at the time of, I mean, when applied in the presence of the rye cover crop, even delayed. So we try to collect that data, but of course, I mean, we have that data when we are seeing the degradation of the, for example, acetochlor or foamicefan over the period of time in no rye versus rye, and we didn't see much of a difference in the soil activity.
Next one, have you seen any work comparing crimped rye versus sprayed rye for termination? This person had heard of previous studies that in sprayed rye you might get spindly beans, I guess.
No, we haven't done any of those studies with comparing the chemically terminated cereal rye versus the roller crimper situation. But again, I mean, I have seen some of those plots in other regions, especially in Pennsylvania. It's a very common practice. They will roll it, and also I know that a lot of growers here in Iowa, they will roller crimp the cereal rye, and I think it's a great strategy. It makes a pretty uniform mat of your cereal rye biomass in between your soybean rows. That's a great tool, I would say. But we haven't specifically looked at it because I don't have the access to the roller crimper yet. But again, that should be very effective as well.
Okay. The next one was going from 30-inch to 15-inch rows helped. Have you done any work with drill beans for even earlier crop canopy?
I have done. I've not done this work here in Iowa, but I've done it in the past with drill-seeded soybean. Of course, I mean, in 15-inch rows, in majority of our work here in Iowa, we are getting soybean canopy for closure 10 to 14 days, I would say, earlier as compared to 30-inch rows, and that makes a whole lot of difference because at that time all your water temp is coming up. With drill seeded, I think you may see a faster canopy formation, an earlier canopy closer. But how much of a difference between drill seeded and 15-inch? I haven't looked at specifically here in Iowa.
Okay, great,
So,
Prashant. Can you go back to the previous slide for the CCA
sure.
CEUs, just to kind of, again, to reiterate this, if you want a CCA CEU, please get that information, your name, the name you entered to watch the webinar, and your CCA number to Elena Whitaker, ALENAW at iastate.edu by 5 o'clock today. Okay, next question. If reducing the weed seed bank is a farmer's primary goal with the cover crop, I guess what recommendations do you have for cover crop seeding rate, date, and timing? And do you think a higher seeding rate would provide greater weed suppression?
I think I partially answered this question earlier, that in a broadcast situation, if you are broadcasting it in corn, you have to go with a higher seeding rate of 60, 65 pounds. But in a drill seeded situation, we haven't seen much of an effect of seeding rate of cereal rye with regards to stand establishment as well as biomass. Because cereal rye is pretty effective in terms of tillering, and if you get a good stand, it should be good. So, I mean, under optimum conditions, again, this is a dry, as Dr. Helmerson was talking about, and I was discussing with him earlier in this presentation, that we have a dry fall. So how much of a cereal rye establishment we will get, how much of a stand it will be, I mean, that's again a question. But in that situation, I think you'd be better off getting some good soil seed contact by using drill seeded as compared to broadcasting. And again, I think 50 to 55 pounds per acre of cereal rye should be optimum.
Maybe one that's kind of been brought up. So you did go into corn residue. Was it pretty reasonable corn yield, and was there a fair bit of corn residue on the surface? Because there are a few people kind of asking about how much corn residue you had there for that cover crop to come up through.
Yeah, I mean, there was fair amount of cover, fair amount of corn residue and corn stalks on the ground. So yeah, it had no influence on our, because we used a 7.5-inch drill for the cover crop, and we didn't see any issues there because of the corn residue.
All right, I think that really captures most of the questions that we got. Dr. Jha, I really appreciate this in your presentation today. Really important topic, and exciting to see some of these results, and looking at kind of ecological ways that we can manage weeds, weed seed bank, and so forth. So very, very exciting work. Again, thank you so much. Again, on the screen is the CCA CEU information. And with that, I will give Dr. Jha the last word. Thank you,
Dr. Helmers. I mean, it's a great opportunity to present some of this research in front of the clientele, and definitely, I think we are looking forward to some of these. As the question came, like, are there any new side of actions coming in the marketplace? I mean, in the next 5 to 10 years, not. So we definitely need to work on some of these precision, sustainable weed management options that we have in the toolbox, and reduce our reliance on one sole tactic. I mean, that's the goal. And throughout the winter extension meetings, I will be talking more about some of these, and how in some of these federal USDA funded projects, we are integrating at a systems level some of these harvest weed seed control methods also. That's a great opportunity to be and hear and talking at the Iowa Learning Farms webinar. Okay, great. Thanks so much, Prashant. And I hope everybody has a great rest of their day and great week. Thank you.